Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
Welcome to the show. This is your host, Darren, and here at the Touch MBA podcast, what we help you do is figure out which schools fit you best by giving you in-depth conversational interviews with admissions directors from the top business schools around the world, as well as with students and alumni who have gone through these programs to give you a feel of what MBA life is really like, which schools might fit you best, and of course, and most importantly, how to get in to your target programs. So this week I had Erin Town on the program. Erin is the MBA Admissions Director at the Foster School of Business at the University of Washington, which is based in Seattle. And this is a really exciting, dynamic business region that I think many more MBA candidates should consider. And Foster is a program that really values and is looking for a sense of purpose from its candidates. So I think you're going to get a lot of good tips from this episode. And it really is a unique program in the sense that it's small, and Foster is the business school in that region of the United States. So you have lots of top companies recruiting from the school, and they have a really great mentorship program, which I think is really special. So I think those of you considering, a program in the west of the United States should definitely listen carefully to this one. Here at Touch MBA, we're all about helping you find best fit schools. And I just want to thank one of our listeners, Little Wing 123, who left us an iTunes review. And I appreciate all the iTunes reviews and Stitcher reviews we get on the show. They really help more people discover this show. So thank you so much. But Little Wing 123 wrote, Touch MBA is a wonderful resource for school research. This is a great podcast to learn about some of the top MBA programs around the world. I got a lot out of it. I also went to touchmba.com and submitted my profile and received a very detailed assessment. That was also very helpful. Highly encourage everyone to try it out. And yes, we do offer free school selection help at touchmba.com. All you need to do is submit your profile there, and we have a new MBA matcher algorithm that's sort of in beta mode right now. So you not only get advice from someone who has been an admissions director before, but also will help you point you in the right direction in terms of which schools would fit you best and that you'd be competitive at. So go check that out at touchmba.com, and let's get straight to the show. This week's guest is Erin Town, who is the Director of MBA Admissions at the Foster School of Business, the University of Washington. And Erin has been working in MBA admissions for Foster for over 10 years. So she's a great person to talk to about the program and how it's evolved and what they're planning to do. Can't wait to learn more about the small, intimate program in the Northwest. Erin, thank you for your time and thanks for being on the show.
You're very welcome.
So my first question is, what makes the Foster MBA unique from, the other top MBA programs in the U.S.?
Yeah, well, you kind of alluded to it with the small class size. I can't say enough about that. That just completely changes the experience for a student. It means that all of the students know each other, your professors know you, and your career coaches know you, which is huge. To be able to be walking down the hall, have the director of career services see you, know you by name, and know where you are in your job search. That's just really hard to replicate in a larger program. The other things that make Foster particularly unique, Seattle, of course, is a really exciting place to be right now. There's a ton of opportunities here. And this business community here in Seattle is just very different from what many people would expect. There's so many different industries and different kinds of companies. And business leaders here are just super approachable and down to earth. So you could be at a networking event and there can be, CEOs in the room, and they're of all ages. They're wearing jeans and casual clothes, and they're very, they have this attitude that they welcome people to ask them questions, and they actually enjoy learning from our students. We have a really exceptional mentor program here, and we hear often that these executive mentors enjoy participating so much because they learn from the students as well as being able to offer some advice to them from their experiences. And then finally, I think the hands-on opportunities you have at Foster, we have an applied strategy program that's part of our first year core curriculum, which is really unique. So you're just in the first year of your MBA and you do a project, a consulting project for a local company. So students are required to do at least 3 practical hands-on experiences while they're at Foster, and there's lots of opportunities for that. So that really builds up your resume while you're in school.
And I want to talk about all 3 of those things because I also sort of had those 3 things in mind. When you talk about Seattle being such an exciting place to do business, for some, especially our international listeners who are less familiar with that part of the US, like what makes it so, I mean, we hear about tech, obviously, but yeah, I mean, could you just kind of expand upon why Seattle is such an exciting place to work and live?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to talk about the weather for a second because so many people think of rain when they think of Seattle, which is really not the case. But really, what we have here is just this beautiful city, and you're surrounded by mountains and water. And I think it really has created an environment that encourages people to be innovative and to try new things. People's individuality is really valued here. So that's true of our program as well, and just of the business community in Seattle. There's so many different kinds of companies, and not every student is interested in working for the big name companies. Some students are interested in startups or nonprofit. And Seattle just seems to have a little bit of everything. But there's also this attitude of, this work-life balance, and my family is important to me in addition to my professional success. So there's a lot of respect for people who are really hardworking and put in a lot of effort into their career, but also want to make time for their family. That makes it, pretty unique. And it's not an enormous city, but it's really growing. And we have a lot of big companies moving in, a lot of companies starting here, and you're just, you're surrounded by that here in Seattle. And really, Foster and University of Washington, it's, we are the biggest game in town. We don't compete for attention with a lot of these companies, like you do in cities that have many, many different large universities and schools.
Exactly, because I was sort of, looking at that career mentoring program, which is what I'd like to talk about next. But the fact that your class size is somewhere in between 100 and 125, somewhere in that range, and then you have this network of say 75 high level executives. So right then you can see the ratio is really good. And you're the only game in town, so they're wanting to recruit from Foster because everyone's there already. Could you tell us more about how a typical student could really benefit from this mentoring program? I mean, from what I read on your website, it sounds like they get to meet with this mentor, a couple times the first year and maybe 4 or 5 times the second year.
Yeah, so just like you said, the first year is a little bit more of a structured approach where you're in a small group of your classmates and you get to meet with a mentor, and they have mentor visits that are scheduled. The second year mentorship opportunity is it's more one-on-one, maybe 2 students per mentor, and it's expected that you meet a certain number of times, but how you meet and where is determined by you and that mentor. And that's when you really start developing, a more personal relationship with this person. And these are really successful people who are obviously very busy, but incredibly giving of their time. We hear stories of mentors inviting their team of students over to their house for dinner, sitting down to coffee, offering themselves as a resource for, as the student is going through the job search and thinking about that. So, it's an opportunity for students to learn from someone. It's not the same as when you go to an event and you're trying to find a job and you're trying to show your resume. They're not expecting you to do that. It's really just about you being open-minded and asking lots of questions and learning from someone who's been through a lot of different experiences.
And what sort of companies are these mentors at right now?
Almost anything you can imagine. So obviously there's some of the obvious ones, some of the big companies here, Amazon, Starbucks, and Microsoft. But there's also small, I was looking at the list recently, and there's a small startup called Blue Dog Bakery that is partly run by one of our alumni, and that's a really interesting, unique kind of experience to learn from someone at a startup, nonprofit community, consulting there's so many different industries here. So there's a pretty wide variety. And students actually have the opportunity there's a very complex sort of database where you get to type in different things about yourself and your priorities and your values, and it can actually tell you which mentors might be a good fit for you. So it helps you narrow that list down when you're trying to choose who you want as your mentor.
Wow, and that's another element of a Foster that seems really interesting to me, which is your choose your own adventure. I don't know if there's a better way to say it, but choose your own adventure approach to your MBA. And I'd like, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like you to kind of explain the structure, because I saw that students can take 5 core courses, 11 elective courses they have to choose from, but then they also have to choose between 2 international perspective activities and 3 practical experience activities. You have certifications and so forth. It goes on and on. But the idea seems to me that you want students to kind of choose their own MBA in that sense. So how does that work when you only have 5 core courses?
Yeah, we want students really to take the reins on their experience, and I think it can be very overwhelming to start looking at the huge list of electives, all the different clubs, all the different extracurricular activities, certificate programs. The best way to think of it is we want students to come to Foster with a sense of what their priorities are and what they're really seeking to accomplish. That does not mean exactly this job at this company after graduation. Almost nobody really knows that when they go to business school, realistically. But what we want is for students to understand what it is that they're trying to develop. Maybe it's communication skills. Maybe it's confidence more generally, stronger sense of confidence. Maybe it's quantitative skills. So we can then take all these different opportunities, classes, student organizations, and help people build this path that's very unique to them. The core curriculum is also unique. Students actually have about 5 classes per quarter. But what's unique about Foster is those classes are all of the professors for your core classes work together on a regular basis. So when you're in your accounting class, that professor is referencing what you're learning in your other classes too. So it really helps you build this strong foundation in the first year, and not just understanding the different pieces separately, but understanding how those pieces work together. And then, in your second year going in, it's all choice. And that can seem overwhelming to students, but really, if you're a good fit for Foster, that sounds exciting. Okay, I have all these different options and all these different opportunities, and I get to pick and choose what combination of those makes most sense for me.
And I can't wait to dive more into some of those elements in the admissions section of the podcast, because I think, you left us some clues there. But before we move on, are there any? Well, first, are there any other ways academically that Foster stands out?
Well, I mentioned the applied strategy. That's your hands-on opportunity in the first year, and it is pretty unique to have that built into the core curriculum. I also should point out that the faculty here, we attract faculty who could work almost anywhere. They're so accomplished, and they love teaching, and I think they choose to work here for a couple big reasons. One being Seattle, which I talked about earlier, just being such an incredible place to live. But another being they enjoy working in a place where they really get to connect with their students, get to know their students by their names. And that's a pretty unique learning experience when you're sitting in a classroom. And for one thing, if you don't show up, it will go noticed. You're definitely not anonymous here. So the learning environment at Foster is really, there's a lot of expected of each student, and each student is expected to come prepared and ready to discuss. And there's a lot of time built in to the classes for students to talk about their own backgrounds and experiences. So That really creates this unique learning environment. Another thing that's really unique here at Foster is we have a really strong entrepreneurship program, Burke Center for Entrepreneurship. And I've heard a lot of students say that they did not necessarily come to business school thinking they were interested in entrepreneurship or even thinking that they might start a company someday, but then end up participating in the Burke Center. And those skills are useful in so many different kinds of career paths, not just starting your own company. But I've also seen people a few years after the program actually decide to go and do it because they realize that they have the tools that they need and they were never really expecting to be at that point in their career. So that program is particularly strong here at Foster.
That's great to know. And are there any exciting sort of developments on the horizon that our listeners should know about? They're planning to apply this year or perhaps next year?
In general, I think people may have heard that we have had a pretty big increase in applications over the last couple of years, but we do plan to keep our programs small. So that's not necessarily a change. That just means that we have had an increased applicant pool, but it's really important to us to keep that small, intimate, personalized experience at Foster. I mentioned field study, applied study projects. So there's a lot of plans to keep building that program and offering more and more opportunities for students to get out in the business community and do projects, including expanding those internationally. So doing more international projects. So that's pretty exciting. The Career Center is also always building on their portfolio of companies. We have a lot of diversity in hiring companies here at Foster. We're one of the top schools anywhere in terms of diversity of companies that recruit. And that's constantly evolving based on what students are interested in, based on what's going on in the market. And then finally, I would say there's a lot of new things on the horizon that are really student driven. We really encourage students. Students are all encouraged to be leaders while they're here and to really make their mark. One example is the Student Investment Fund, which was set up the class of 2011. Their class gift started a student investment fund that is now being managed. And it's not just a pretend sort of thing. It's a real investment fund that they're managing, a real portfolio. And that's going to continue on. And I think it's really exciting to see what the students are able to come up with. We give them a lot of resources, but they really take the reins on some of these things.
Yeah, I think taking the reins seems to be like a big focus, right, of Foster. So if we can now talk about admissions, the admissions side of things, what type of applicants are you really excited to see?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'll skip over some of the obvious ones, which is, like all the top schools, we're looking for people who can handle their coursework and, for people who have experience to share with their classmates and who've researched their career goals. But I think here at Foster, we're looking for people who genuinely want to really dive into this experience, who really want to, be kind of they want to pick and choose and make decisions based on their own passions and not just sort of get fed along on a particular track and fed into a particular company. So what we're looking for in the application is a sense of purpose and, again, not to be confused with, okay, here's my short-term and my long-term goal very specifically. I think a lot of candidates kind of get stuck in that because they think that's what we expect. What we're looking for is that they have a sense of purpose. What does it mean to you as an applicant? What will success mean to you at the end of all of this? What are you looking to achieve? And we want to see a sense of that in the application. We also really want to know the real candidate. We want to know not just your last few jobs that you've had that you feel are relevant to your career path. We want to know what hobbies you have, your extracurricular activities. We want to know all of your work experience since your freshman year in college. So that means your resume for a Foster MBA application would maybe be 2 or even 3 pages. That's not something a lot of schools ask for, but we're really looking for people with a sense of balance.
Interesting.
Who are interested in for instance, somebody who their day job is they're a financial analyst, but they're really passionate about music and they've explored that. So they have started a band, or, people who take the time to really follow their.
Why is that important to you? Now, I mean, I think it's very interesting. I'm just curious, why is that important to you and to Foster?
And that tells us that they're going to come here to Foster, and they're not just going to get stuck in one particular aspect of the program. If you go to an MBA and you just focus on getting good grades, or you just focus on the academic side, you're really going to miss out. Or if you are so focused on one particular path, but you're not interested in exploring other options, or maybe going to a company visit for a company you've never heard of, but someone has told you that you might find it interesting because of what you value in your life. So, we're really interested in people who have an open mind, and quite honestly, who can balance many different things. The program is very rigorous. Students say it's the most challenging thing they've ever been through in their lives, but it's also the funnest experience they've ever had in their lives. It's not uncommon here at Foster, amidst everything else that people are doing, for some student to say, hey, this is just an example, but I'm a trained, dancer. I'm from India, and I want to teach my classmates about this thing I'm really interested in. So a bunch of those people will get together and learn how to do this dance. It's just an opportunity to explore. It just creates a richer learning environment, and sends us a signal that this is someone who is going to make the most of this experience.
Yeah, so I sense this idea of you're looking for students with clear direction, or with a purpose, as you said, purpose and direction, but who are open-minded and flexible in how they're able to get there. And so you mentioned something interesting, that some students may need, or they may feel like they need more confidence in their careers, and I think that was really striking to me, because most MBA applicants feel like they have to be Superman or Superwoman when they apply, and that they're kind of the masters of the universe. They're so good at everything they do. They feel like they have to present this to the schools they're applying to. And your first essay is about identifying the gaps that are currently preventing you from achieving your purpose. So I kind of wanted to ask you about that. I think some applicants might be, oh, well, I don't want to show Foster that I'm really bad at this. I mean, that might look bad on me, right? So, I mean, do you have any tips there in terms of how applicants can best present themselves while also showing that they're self-aware, that they kind of know where they're lacking, and can show that to you?
Yeah, I mean, the way we look at it is, if you have all the tools that you need and you have no gaps or deficiencies, why do you need an MBA? And a very common question that I ask when I do admission interviews is, I ask them a little bit about some of their ideas and where they're interested in going next in their career. And then I ask, why not just do that now? Why not do that now instead of getting the MBA? And I think someone who's spent some time really looking into those different career paths can say, well, I'm missing this and this and this. And that's a really honest answer to, well, that's why I need an MBA. There's these things I really hope to build upon. And confidence is a really big thing. I think, not everybody who comes into an MBA program can just walk into a room and step up to someone and give them their 2-minute pitch. I think a lot of the MBA is about building confidence, not just in networking.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Yeah, it's also in when you do go back out there into the working world, it's about being able to confidently share your ideas with your colleagues and sell give a presentation and really get people behind you. That confidence can really come from obviously gaining the competence and understanding of what goes behind it, but also just having that confidence in your attitude.
Yeah, that you deserve a seat at that table, right?
Yeah.
And I also noticed with your admissions process, I saw something that I've never seen with another school, which is that after applicants submit their applications, you may invite them to complete a short video interview.
Yep.
So, where, you'll need internet, webcam, and it sounds like, could you just tell us more about this video interview? How many people roughly, do you require to go through that? Is it everyone who then has to make it to the interview stage? And then kind of how long that video is, and what you're looking for there.
Yeah, that was new last year. So this will be our second year using the video interview component. Especially as our application volume increase, it's really, I think you've probably heard me say in many different ways, it's really important to us to get to know our applicants as much as possible. We're building a pretty small program here, and each person counts. So we want to make sure that this is someone we want here at Foster. And it's, just reading applications, you don't always get a really strong sense of someone's personality. Some people feel like their writing skills are really excellent. They can really get their personality through, but the videos really help us get more a sense of someone's personality in addition to the application that they submit. So in this coming application year, we will invite a fairly large majority of our applicant pool to participate in videos. So generally what we're going to be doing is doing kind of an initial assessment of the applications. And if someone seems like they're within the competitive range or they would qualify for admission program, they'll be invited to participate in a video interview. And I think there's a lot of anxiety out there about video interviews. And I can say from watching, several hundred last year that people really did quite well. I think if you remember that we're not trying to test you on your knowledge of something, we are just trying to get to know you better. So if your dog barks in the middle of your video, it's not a big deal. Or if you need to think for just a second, it's not a big deal. We're just trying to get to know you as a person a little bit better through those videos. The admission interview is then a separate thing that generally would happen after the video interview.
So that video interview questions, those last, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes?
Probably from start to finish takes 15 to 20 minutes. You have an opportunity to do practice questions, which we definitely recommend. That's so you can test out your sound and just kind of get comfortable with the setup. Then we ask two different questions. It's actually one of us here on the team asking the question, and then you have about 30 seconds to think, and then the recording begins. And the way I try to make people feel a little better about it is imagine if you're sitting in a live interview with someone and they asked you a question and then you sat there for 30 seconds thinking before you responded. It's a fairly long amount of time to actually think about a response. And again, we're not looking for the most perfect articulate response. We're just kind of getting to know you a little bit better.
Great. So yeah, maybe we could talk about your interview then. How important is that interview to your admissions process?
The interview is very important to our admission process. The interview, I feel, is really where we have determined if we invite someone to interview that they at least fall within the range of what we're looking for our program. But that only says so much about a person. The interview is really where we can dig a little deeper and understand more about your motivations, why you want to be at Foster, not just why you want an MBA, but why you want to be here. That's so important. That's really what we're looking for in the interview. And something that's fairly unique about Foster is that our admissions team does all of our interviews. So they're always one-on-one with an admissions staff member from Foster. We travel quite a bit, so we try to do as many interviews as possible in person, but we also do Skype interviews. And we will have looked at your application before you interview with us. So,
the entire application, right?
Yeah. People are surprised sometimes, like, oh, you noticed that I play the guitar, or you saw that I, moved last year. So we really do look at that, and no two interviews are alike. It's designed to be more of a conversation and not so much just a list of standard questions that we ask every applicant.
Got it. Okay, so you've shared so much with us, but would you have any other tips for applicants on how they can improve their chances?
Yeah. Well, number one, get to know us. There's too many people who hesitate to contact us directly. I mean, we put our contact information all over our website. We really are encouraging people to reach out and get to know us. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Ask your questions. If you have very detailed questions about the application, ask us. We're happy to help. And then that helps us when your application comes in. Oh, okay, this is so-and-so. We met this person or we chatted with this person online. So that's my number one advice. Another piece of advice, and this is going to sound really obvious, but just be totally complete and ready to go when you apply. You don't want to be an applicant who submits an application and then has to follow up because, well, there's something missing or there's something you're still working on or you want to retake the test. You want to apply when your application is as strong as it can be. And that does not mean racing to meet the first deadline. There's too many people that think applying to that first deadline is really going to be what gets them in. It's not applying early, it's applying with your best application. So ideally you submit your application by the deadline and then we can just get started on our review right away. There's nothing missing at that point that we have to work on with you, which just can kind of delay things a bit.
And I noticed that international applicants, you guys require them to apply by mid-January, right?
Right, January 15th.
January 15th.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. And I think that's, I'm glad you said that because I also see that, the candidates that come to our site, that it's a very common question.
Yeah.
They almost feel like even if they can't get their best GMAT score or, put together the best recommendations, they have to apply in that first round because they have the best chance. So you're saying very directly that apply when your application is the strongest.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, you want to look at each school you're applying to. Some schools have rolling admissions, and by January, maybe they have, considered the large majority of their applicants. Now, for Foster, I mean, when you think about it, the only way it's going to start getting competitive is if we already have a fairly full class. That doesn't really happen until sometime in maybe April or May. By January, we still have really no idea what size our class is coming in. So we're admitting people who are strong candidates. It's as simple as that. You don't have a better chance of getting in if you apply early. You have a better chance of getting in if you're submitting a competitive application. That's a conversation we can always have too. I've had many conversations with candidates where that first or second deadline is approaching and there's something that they just feel like, oh, this isn't as good as it can be. And sometimes you're always welcome to reach out to us directly. And most of the time, my advice is take the time to make that improvement. Ideally, you are identifying and dealing with your weaknesses as early as possible so that it's not your application is in and then we're trying to determine we can handle that weakness in our program.
And I mean, so your number one tip was to reach out to Foster about your profile, about your interests and so forth. Maybe some applicants feel, well, you guys are going to be judging us whether we get in or not. And so it's a great service because you're counseling them, but at the same time, they might feel like they're exposing too much of themselves. Or is it okay if applicants can, say, look, I'm not so strong in this area. Maybe my quant score on my GMAT is low or something else with their profile, and that's okay with you guys. Like they can have this straightforward conversation where it's not.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love those conversations, and there's one of the most rewarding parts of my job is having someone apply who in the past, maybe had something they were struggling with or a weakness in their application. Maybe they didn't get in the first time around, but we worked through it and they showed that determination and that worked with us. They worked through that weakness, and then to see them successfully get in the program is really exciting to us. So we love to have those conversations with candidates, and see them make the improvements. It really shows a lot of, like I said, determination and drive if a candidate takes the time to really understand where they're falling behind and to ask us how they might make an improvement in that area in their application. That shows a lot.
Well, that's a great service. So those of you listening, definitely do that.
Yep.
So in terms of financing, scholarships are a big concern. We have a lot of international listeners. So could you let us know kind of what percentage of your class gets scholarships, what typical amounts are, and most importantly, how applicants can improve their chances of winning funding there?
Yeah, so in terms of scholarship and funding opportunities, we award merit-based scholarships to around 40 to 50% of our incoming students. Now, merit-based means we are looking at your application and determining how competitive of a candidate you are. Generally, to be considered for a scholarship like that, you have to have at least our average GMAT score or higher. So that's something to keep in mind. We also offer opportunities for continuing students to apply for scholarships. So if someone comes in without a scholarship, there's still an opportunity that they could get one for their second year. And it doesn't matter whether you're a domestic or an international applicant. All of our candidates are considered for scholarships. A lot of times we're looking for people who can offer some kind of diverse perspective to our class. So that's another thing we consider. Um, in general, as you want to look into every option possible to get your studies funded so you're not having to work while you're in school. If you decide to do a full-time program, you'll really sell yourself short if you use all the spare time that you have trying to work or do a teaching assistantship in some cases, and then missing out on networking opportunities and the real reason you're there. So we encourage international students to explore private loan options in addition to scholarship opportunities.
Got it. And those scholarships range from like, roughly what range?
Yeah, so we offer partial scholarships. Generally, we try to spread our scholarships out a little bit more so they can range anywhere from $10,000 or so up to 35,000. So anywhere from about a third of your tuition to nearly all of your tuition covered.
Wow. Oh, okay. That's per year. I see what you're right.
Yeah, per year. So our average scholarship last year was somewhere around 18 to 20,000. Tuition, keep in mind here at Foster is pretty competitive. I mean, that's obviously a large sum, but when you compare it to other schools, my advice for all applicants is to make sure you're really looking at out-of-pocket costs and not just the scholarship amount you get, but how much will you end up spending in the end? What is the actual tuition for the program versus what you received in scholarship funding?
I think a lot of applicants forget about all those other costs.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a big part of that side of the equation. Okay, thank you for sharing those tips. And then my favorite part of the podcast is talking about careers. We already discussed this sort of powerful network of executives that you have mentoring your students, and that Washington and Foster is kind of the big dog on campus in that part, that region of the U.S. What else makes the school special from a career perspective?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we just a few years ago, we built into our core curriculum something called ProDev. It's short for professional development. So our full-time students actually have a core class which keeps them on track with their job search. And I think a lot of people coming into an MBA, they have every intention of staying on track with their job search, but it is really hard to do that when you have so many things going on. Really rigorous academic portion of the program. You're trying to get involved in clubs, you're out in the business community, volunteering, you're getting to know your classmates, and you're trying to keep on track with your job search. So building that into the curriculum really can make a difference for some students and just keeping them on track. Another thing that I've mentioned already, but I'll say again, is just the personalized approach to career coaching here. We, for many, many years, have had a very diverse group of students in terms of where they want to go after graduation. We really don't have just 2 to 3 big companies that take the majority of our students. We have many, many companies that take many, many students. And that means that we have really had to build a career management system that is very unique to each student. So our career coaches will work directly with their students that they're working with and determine what the best path to their success will be. So if someone is looking at nonprofit organizations or small companies, they're going to have a very different approach to the job search than someone who's looking at a big company that has an MBA recruiting system already built in. So that personalized approach and really knowing our students really helps students to find the right path for them, not just the big company that everybody's going to work for. That's pretty unique. And then finally, just the the opportunities to connect with the Seattle business community. There's just so many different kinds of companies here. And people come into an MBA with particular kinds of backgrounds. And I think one of the most valuable parts of an MBA is just totally expanding your horizons outside of the industry or type of company that you're familiar with. And there's so many opportunities to do that here in Seattle.
And yeah, in terms of your like placements in various industries and functions, I noticed that your program has a very large percentage of students working for technology companies. I guess that makes sense, being in Seattle, about 40%. Has that always been a large proportion of your students moving into that industry, or is that, kind of more recently?
Yeah, it has been that way for some time. I mean, Seattle has been a technology hub for quite a while, and I will remind listeners that, when you think about working in technology, a lot of prospective students will say to me, "Well, I don't have any background in technology at all." And I remind them that, this is just the industry. This is an industry that's very popular here. So we have a lot of people who are focused on finance and then they end up in a technology company, but they're not actually, working on the technology. So that's something to keep in mind. One thing we've seen some development in is more and more interest among students and interest among companies in the consulting field. That's become and there's so many different kinds of, there's the big ones that everybody knows about, but there's also a lot of smaller consulting firms. Firms that do work here in Seattle, firms that work with nonprofit organizations. And, I think it's an exciting way to use your MBA because you really get to see a lot of different organizations. And, it really, I think, reflects on the experience our students have had in the program with actually having some consulting experience while they're a student that lends itself well to finding a full-time job after graduation in the consulting field. Now, finance is something that has been kind of on the decline, and finance as an industry isn't um, very big in Seattle, but there's a lot of finance opportunities in the corporate world, for instance. And so we have students who are going to work for companies like Microsoft or Amazon, but in finance roles. Um, and that's just kind of a growing trend across the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's and what types of students are the ones that just kind of, like you said, take the reins and succeed in this career side? I know you guys really pride yourself on your high employment percentage, right? Within 3 months, I think you guys are what, 95 or 96%?
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like the vast majority of your students are able to find those jobs, but what are the keys to doing that?
Yeah. Um, a lot of it has to do with soft skills and personality, which is really why more and more schools, and we're placing more and more emphasis on the admission interview. People come into MBA programs with all sorts of different backgrounds, and it's great to have impressive experience and companies on your resume that employers will recognize. But really, where it comes down to it is that interview. And when you're trying to make a connection with a potential employer, they're looking for people who fit their culture and who they want to work with and who they feel will come, roll up their sleeves and get the job done. And I think that's one of the things Foster MBAs are really known for is they are really ready to jump in and do what it takes to make a difference at a company. They don't have what some people would call a typical MBA attitude of, well, I have an MBA now and I should be at this certain level. It's more about, I'm really passionate about what your company does and I can't wait to dive in and get involved. And the students who have been particularly successful in the job search have been the ones who really, from the very beginning, just put themselves out there, just shown up at networking events, asked questions, showed a sense of curiosity. That's so important. Um, it's easy to be sort of intimidated by the whole thing, and keep in mind that there's a lot of resources to help you get to that point, to help you, we talked about confidence, to help you get to that point where you're comfortable walking in to a crowded room and introducing yourself to somebody and telling them a little bit about yourself. But those are the students who really succeed. They're utilizing their resources, they're putting themselves out there, they're doing informational interviews left and right. I mean, there's never another time in your life when you're going to have that many contacts just at your fingertips. And you're a student, so they're really happy to talk to you. It's a lot harder to do that once you're out in the professional world again and you're looking for a job. You're just a student and you're wanting to ask questions and learn, and they're very receptive to that.
Wow. And yeah, I just this has been a great chat, and I just have one more question, which is, is there anything about the Foster MBA that candidates would be surprised to know?
I'll say something that people think they know about Foster in Seattle, and you hear that word laid back and informal. You hear words like that to describe this region. So I think what people would be surprised to know is that laid back does not mean passive in any way. What it means is students call their professors by their first names. CEOs are often seen wearing jeans. I talked about respect for individuality, being yourself. And I think the attitude is more not so much, I'm laid back and whatever happens, happens. It's more like we want our team to succeed and we're going to roll up our sleeves to make that happen. So there's a very strong sense of I care about the people around me. I'm not willing to kind of elbow them out of the way for my own personal success, but I want all of us to succeed together. And people just willing to jump in and make that happen. So that's just it's a different sort of culture here. And you can't tell who somebody is or what their background is just by their appearance or what they're wearing or the way they talk. It's just, I think a lot of it comes from the technology sector here and that sense of innovation, and anyone can succeed if they just throw themselves into it. So that's just kind of a stereotype that I think I want to clear up is that informal nature does not mean relaxed and unambitious. It's quite the opposite.
That's great. I think that's a great way to end the program. Thank you so much for your time, Erin. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. It's been great chatting with you.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your number one school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.